what's going on, guys? It's Rogan, and welcome back to week 3 of our Overwatch League predictions videos. Last week we definitely picked up from where we left. Well, not where we left off. We picked up the pace. Kind of caught up with the people in the league, but not really. The first week definitely screwed us over for that. But we're gonna keep doing these. There aren't really any teams to break down, so this may be a shorter video, but we're gonna give a little bit of analysis on some of the games, but any of the games that is like an obvious 3-0, then we're just gonna say that and move on. So, going into our first game, we have Boston Uprising versus Paris Eternal. Now, this is going to be a very hard game to predict, especially for the June Joust, because as you can see, Boston Uprising are 2-0. They've 3-0 twice so far, and Paris Eternal 1-1, 4-3, but they had a good win over Washington. So, I don't really know what I want to go for this one. The favorites are Boston, but again, Washington were the favorites in the Paris game, and they still came out on top there. So, what are you thinking?
Honestly, I think it kind of has to be Boston here. I mean, obviously they're the favorites, so why wouldn't you say Boston? But even looking back now, when's the last time they played? 2 weeks ago, or did they play last week? Even 2 weeks ago, they were dominant in their games when they played. I mean, they're only like a game out of qualifying technically, because they're just barely behind Houston at 3-1 because they haven't played their last 2 games for qualifiers yet. I really think you have to pick Boston, but I think it's going to be close because both of these teams are very evenly matched, especially in roster too.
Yeah, and you got to think Boston are going to be looking at this game to get them into the actual regional qualifiers. And I don't think they're going to be able to pick up the one against the Gladiators in the next day.
Exactly. So this is probably they're probably thinking this is our game to tie with Houston, and make it into knockout Sunday next week.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna go 3-1 to Boston. I'm tired of picking 3-2s and then not going to the full way. I think this is gonna be a 3-1 to Boston.
Yeah, I think it's more likely than not a 3-1.
Well, Boston haven't dropped a map, but I'm not letting them teams not dropping maps convince me because Washington hadn't dropped a map and then they lost 3-0 2 times in a row. So moving on to our next match, which actually have another really good match here. We have the Dallas Fuel going up against the Florida Mayhem. Both teams are currently 1-1, and they're going to be looking to get a win here and propel themselves into winning their next game. Both of their next games are very winnable for each team. So, they could go at it here, but who knows? After watching them against San Francisco Shock, where they put up a good fight, I feel like Dallas is still the favorites, even though they're 1-1 for this one. But then you can't
Right.
count out Florida and anyway.
I think you also can't count out Florida because think of it like a shock scenario. So this is how I'm thinking about the Florida game for people who don't know. Florida lost to Dallas during May Melee, which then Dallas won May Melee. So you have to think, especially because the Shock seemed to come out with a fire, that maybe Florida's going to do the same and they want revenge on Dallas. They want to show that Dallas isn't all they're chalked up to be and it was a fluke.
Yeah.
That being said, I think Dallas has the stronger overall roster, especially now adding Pine.
Yeah, it's gonna come down to whether Pine is actually legal to play this thing, but I'm gonna guess it's gonna be like the Spitfire Sparky. You won't be able to come out unless you make it into the knockouts, but yeah. I think like you could really go put this either way. I think I'm gonna have to back Dallas still. They've been too good, not too bad. But both teams equally you could go either way. And
yeah, I think I have to back Dallas here.
I think I still give Florida a map. I don't think it'll be a 3-0.
I think they get 2. I think Yaki is too good. I think. Hold on. While I pull up their roster really quick, I think Yaki is too good. I think Gangnam Jin is also a little bit too good to not
pick up a second map.
Yeah, to not like count them out for a second map.
That's fair. We're gonna be different from this one. I'm gonna stick with 3-1. I think Dallas will be able to close it out. fairly easily after dropping a map.
I
Okay.
think I have to stick at 3-2. I think Florida's too good to count out for a second map.
Yeah. All right. Moving into the East region for Friday, because there are games on Friday starting on Thursday this week because of Knockout Sunday. So we
Woo!
got the Guangzhou Charge taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. And now, if you looked at this in main melee, you would have said, "Oh, easy, Philadelphia win this." But the Charge have looked good in the June Joust, and I don't think you should count them out of this game. Even yes, obviously Philly they were dominant in the main melee, but it's whether or not they've taken and learned from those two losses within the first week of the June Joust, and if they can build on that and come back and win. But then it's this Charger coming off a big momentum spike after winning in the first week, so I don't really know where to go with this one. Like, there's obviously you can go back to Fusion because of how good their team is, but there's still so an underdog story here.
Yeah, I think June Joust has kind of been a strange area for Philly because of the bans, which the stream loves to tell us about all the time. But I think it's been strange for them to adapt to not having a Reinhardt or a Tracer, especially having Rascal on that team, even though he's very good at just about every DPS in the game. He is a very, very high level tracer, and I think that's been a strange finding their footing. But I mean, Guangzhou Charge is 1-1 with a 0 map diff. So even though they've been good, I still think Philly is one of the best teams, in APAC. I just think they need to find their footing this weekend, and I think the Charge are a good team to start to find that footing.
Which I mean, it just comes down to whether they keep putting Carpe on the Hanzo again, because that didn't work last time, and they paid for it. Obviously, Manu and Hotba need to step it up. They weren't really that good in their first opening two games, and obviously the Ryan band you could say too. I think the only standout so far that we've seen, because yes, they could turn around, but what we've seen from them is their support line. That's the only one that's continued to be how good they were in the main melee. But I
Exactly.
I think I don't think it'll be a 3-0 because I think the Charge have been however on a good momentum spike, but I think it'll be a 3-1 for this one.
I I don't know who you're. I think I have to go 3-1 Philly. I think they're just too strong, and maybe that's a little biased towards my end, but also I think um, the solidifying of especially Hotba's spot on this Philly Fusion team after they just signed him for the rest of this season. I honestly think that's gonna change a lot, and that's gonna make him feel more at home with Philadelphia, which is maybe something he wasn't 100% sure about yet because he didn't have, he didn't have that guaranteed rest of the season. Can't be dropped at any point now. But I mean, I could see this going either way.
You also have that same mindset for Tilby because he's just been signed on to for the rest of the season. He could easily step up his game knowing that he's got his position secured. Which I mean,
Exactly.
they still have they have a lot of they have one backup in Funny Astro who I don't think we've seen yet, but I think it's because of the visa issue with them moving over to APAC. The team they have is the only team they can build, so they're missing people like Poco, Echo, Funny Astro, and Shockwave, which could make a huge difference. But at the moment it's just the one team, and hopefully they can build on their momentum because, as we said, they're a momentum-based team. And I think that they can make a push. It's just they need to 3-0 both of these games, and I don't think they're going to.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think the Charge take at least one.
Right. Going over to the next game, this is going to be an interesting one because both teams really need to win this to get into the top four and solidify their place, and only one of them is going to be able to walk away with it. So we've got the Chengdu Hunters against the Seoul Dynasty. Now, if Seoul come out and play like they have against New York Excelsior, play like they have in the build up to Grand Finals in the previous stages of Grand Finals, then they can easily win this. Because Chengdu have been 3-0 before, they have come out sloppy before. But if Chengdu get the momentum, then this could easily go in their favor as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, honestly, I think Chengdu is the stronger team here. I mean, looking at last week, or 2 weeks ago, they got 3-0'd by Shanghai, but I don't think that's really an indicator of how good or how bad Chengdu is, because I think Shanghai is just running APAC right now, at least at this very moment in this meta. But they beat Philly 3-1. I mean, they were pretty dominant on Busan and on Ilios. They didn't drop a map on either of those. Yeah, they went 1-2-1 on Eichenwald and drew Temple of Anubis, but we're seeing a lot more draws on Anubis regardless. And I just think the Chengdu roster is a little bit better than the Seoul roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they Seoul really have to sort it out with like communication with their team and switching it up, and it's whether or not they can do that.
That is, unless somehow we see another Fitz Hollywood performance, which I don't think we will.
I think this could be 3-2, but
Yeah, I think I'm going to say 3-2 just because of history of these two teams. But again, that's no indicator, I guess. I mean, we've had week 2. I said there were going to be 3-1s that ended up being 3-0s, and 3-2s that ended up being 3-1s. So maybe I'm just always off by one.
Yeah. Like we said in the past, if you want to get them right, just predict the opposite of what we do.
Exactly.
So, moving into the final APAC game for the Friday, we have the LA Valiant against the Hangzhou Spark, and I'm just gonna 3-0.
Do we even need to talk about this?
No, we don't. 3-0 to the Spark. The Spark are gonna. This is gonna be what solidifies the Spark in the top 4. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
At 3-0, there's no way.
Going into the West region games on Friday, we have Boston Uprising against LA Gladiators. And as I said before, this isn't. I don't think Boston win this, but I think they'll keep it competitive. Obviously, they've been really good so far in the June Joust. They've given some upsets, maybe beating some teams who are strong in the melee. Gladiators were about middle of the pack in the melee, so just not really. I don't think there's a clear favorite necessarily with how the two teams have been performing. Obviously, above 2-0. Boston have won all of their maps, and I think dropped a couple maps. Double check that. Yes, they dropped a map. So this is going to be a very close game. I feel like, unless LA really want to book their spot into the knockouts and just come out swinging and just take Boston off guard, or the other way around. I don't think this is. LA haven't really done 3-2s. It's either 3-0, 3-1, or they're losing.
Yeah, I think this is a 3-1. I really think that this Gladiators team, it just has a lot more oomph to them. The Gladiators, of course. I mean, I think the Gladiators, especially. I mean, I know we said we're going to try and keep this shorter, but I've said it so many times. Their tank line is phenomenal. Their DPS is phenomenal, even though they didn't really use Moth much last week. Moth is still really good and a really good Lucio backup if you need him. Even then, Steud came in last week and did phenomenal. I don't see Los Angeles losing this.
No. I think LA win this 3-1.
Same.
Hey, next game we have the Shock versus Vancouver Titans.
We don't need to talk about this.
3-0.
Yeah.
3-0. Alright.
Yep.
Last game of Friday, we have the Florida Mayhem taking on the Washington Justice. Now, do Washington get a win here? Do they take a couple maps? They were very dominant, as we know, in the melee. It just comes to whether or not they adapt to this new meta coming into this week and try and turn it around against Florida, who have been a bit of an up and down team in the June Joust, 1-1 at the moment. Obviously, Florida needing this win, especially if things go the way we predicted. So, I feel like Washington don't get the win here. I feel like Florida come out with a fire in them after losing to Dallas, in my predictions at least. And they basically they try their best to put their spot into the knockouts. They try and sneak in that fifth or sixth spot.
Mm. I kind of feel the same way. Obviously, I think Florida's going to win, but I would watch out because Washington could play spoiler. While winning does not mean that they are basically out of June Joust at this point, unless somehow they win both their games, which I don't think they will, which we'll talk about later. But watch out for them to play spoiler to Florida, because if Florida comes out and loses to Dallas, and instead of coming out with a fire, is sort of down, which sometimes you'll see, which is what I think we saw in May Melee with the shock during knockouts. I think Washington could easily play spoiler and go 1-3 for May Melee, or for June Joust, sorry.
I think this is a 3-1 or 3-0 for me.
I think it's a 3-1.
Yeah, I think Washington are good. Well, we know they're good. So I think we got this in the map here. I'm gonna go 3-1 Florida. But going into the final East region games, we don't need to talk about this next one. This is quite easily 3-0 to the Fusion, just straight up.
Right, but let me say this. This is where you could see LA start to put pieces together, especially if Philly is still sort of slow and cold like they have been these past couple of weeks. You could see a draw. You could see maybe one map win, but there's no way they're winning this match.
I mean, LA haven't even taken a map yet, so yeah, they could take a map, but it's hard to predict them to take a map, especially against, even though Philadelphia haven't come out the best, it's still hard for me to predict them taking a map against team competition.
Yeah.
Alright. Next game. This is going to be a really interesting one, especially if Seoul loses to Chengdu, because quite easily, either one of these teams could sneak to the fourth spot. Even Philly could do if they trio the charge. So, this could go either way. I think Seoul have the slightly better roster, but the Charge are on a bit of a momentum streak at the moment. You think even after losing to the Fusion, they can still come out with a fire and try and take maps off of Seoul. But
Right, but just looking at it right now, also sorry for cutting you off, but they're tied in basically everything. I mean, they're tied in overall at 4-4 each. They're tied in June Joust qualifying record at 1-1, and they're tied at map differential at 0. This could literally go either way. It just depends on who has momentum. If somehow Chengdu loses to Seoul, Seoul could take it. If the Charge win this weekend, Charge could take it. If neither of them win, it could just be a stall out and it's up in the air. This one is hard.
It is hard. I think I'm gonna give it to Seoul. I think Seoul takes 3-1 or 3-2. I think 3-1. Maybe a
I
as well.
Yeah, I think it's 3-1. If they play Anubis, I think they draw.
Yeah, easily. East region is like an expert in drawing on Anubis at this point. So, yeah. All right.
I mean, so is West.
Going into the last game that we have the Chengdu Hunters going up to the Hangzhou Spark. Obviously, if my predictions go the way they say they will, which I mean they're facing the balance probably, but the Spark will already booked their spot, whereas the Chengdu Hunters will probably still be fighting for their spot. Not they will be fighting for their spot. So
Yeah.
would you say that the Spark will be on the beach at this point, or do you think they're going to come out and try and continue? Because this is still a league game. We have to remember they're still fighting for their spots, even though they're
right
in the tournament. So
I think this is a warm up for Spark. I think it'll be close, but I think they use this as a warm up where they'll still play hard, obviously, because it's a league game and it matters for overall standings as well. But I mean, 2-0 plus 5 map differential for this tournament alone. Add to that just a 6-1 record in general, only losing to, I believe, the Charge, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I really can't see the Spark just end their reign of what seems to be dominance right now.
Remember, by the time this game comes around, if they win, they'll be 9-1 and +8 in their map diff as well.
Exactly.
So I think Chengdu are gonna win this, but it's gonna be close. And I think this will be another 3-2. But it could also be a 3-1 if Chengdu Hunters get the momentum of going across the games, because as we've seen in the past, as soon as they start winning games, they continue to win games.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'm gonna mirror you, but I think I have to give it to the Spark. I think I'm too big of a fan of the Spark at the moment. I think they're really good, and I think their roster is really well put together. And I just think, even though Chengdu is going to have momentum coming out off of the Seoul game, I think the Spark are also going to have momentum coming out of the Valiant game, knowing that they are a top contender in APAC.
So that brings our East region predictions. So now we're going to finish off. Now we have 3 more games. This is another double points game, so even more important for us. Paris Eternal against LA Gladiators. Obviously Paris would have to win this to stand a chance, but with what we've been saying for the Gladiators, I don't think that Paris win this.
I don't either.
I think they take a map, honestly.
Yeah, I could see it. Because we're starting to see more of that with Paris.
Yeah, they will put up a fighting chance, even if they're 2-0 down in 0. So take it to a draw, they'll take a win, and they'll take it to 4 or 5 maps. So
we could see a shock fuel situation.
Yeah. So 3-1 Los Angeles Gladiators. That's what I'm going for here.
Yeah. Another one we don't need to talk about. I mean, let me put it this way. I know I'm beating a dead horse. Vancouver has a good roster. They've tied, they've drawn maps, they've taken maps, but I think Dallas is too dominant.
Alright. Final game before Knockout Sunday. We may have a video up for Knockout Sunday. It might just be me. When we get to close to that, we'll cross that bridge then. But final game now. We have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Washington Justice. Now, yeah, I think Washington could take a map, but
I do too, honestly. I mean, listen. The Shock this season have looked like a momentum team, in my opinion. So far, they've had their best games after big losses. Take, for example, the game against Florida, when they just steamrolled them right after Melee. Where they had one of the fastest Hanamura times in all of Overwatch League. You have the game against Dallas this past week, the revenge game, which was basically coming off a big loss to Dallas. And then you had the Toronto game, which just seemed like dominance in general. But I don't want to say the Shock are getting comfortable right now, especially at their 2-0 record, where it seems like they're basically a shoo-in regardless. For June Joust, again, this is going to be their second tournament that they're in Knockout Sunday for, if things go the way we say they will. But you have to give props to Washington. This Washington team is good, and we've seen them play good in May. I mean, Mag, Jerry, Bebe, Fury, Closer all looked good. Assassin looked really good in May. And even earlier in June, even though the record doesn't reflect it, obviously, at 0-2, they've put up a fight in their games. It's not they're not going down easy. They're going down slinging at the very least.
Yeah. So I feel like Washington is into talking about in terms of series. We're not entirely sure of the maps at the moment, but I feel like Washington could take the first game on Control because Control is quite a momentum based. Obviously, it's a momentum based game mode. And the Shark have lost points on Control, so they could take this. It could be a Houston situation against Toronto. They go 1-0 down and then get all three maps that preceding that, or there could be a draw in there. Or it could be 2-0 and Washington fight back. I think either way, this is still a 3-1.
I I think so, but also I'm sorry. I just looked back at the last two games for Washington during June Joust. They lost 3-0 to Boston and Paris. So, and if our predictions go the way they are, they're going to lose 3-1 to Florida as well. I could see this being a 3-0. But I don't know. I think I have to go 3-0.
Yeah, actually. Given their past record, we have to look at it in terms of this tournament and what they've done in the past, how they've been playing. So, yeah, I think 3-0 is a fair assessment of how they've been playing so far. So, that wraps up all of our predictions for the week 3 of the June Joust. As I said, there will be Knockout Sunday. There will be probably a video from me. So, thank you guys for watching again. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe for your meal, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.
So